Hey Brian, thanks for showing up. Hey, for our dinner party episode, I thought I might make us some osso buco. Does that sound good?
Sure, it sounds good.
Perfect. It just needs to braise for about 3 hours, and so we can just do the podcast for those 3 hours while we're waiting.
A 3-hour podcast? That's more than double our longest episode.
Yeah.
I'm getting a call right now. What? I guess my house is flooded. I have to go. I have to go check it out.
Well, you can always get a new house. You can't always record a new podcast episode with me. You said you didn't have plans.
That's true.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, and this week we're talking about the Office episode Dinner Party, an episode that's more cringe than Brian trying to rap. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and when did I ever try to rap?
You try all the time. I have cameras in your house, I'm sorry.
Huh, cool.
You're surprisingly okay with that.
You just gotta double down on the crazy.
Sometimes. When it's us two, that's exactly how it goes.
So wait, so you only have cameras in my house?
Yes.
Okay, so I got you beat then.
Oh, God. and you win.
Yeah,
well
exactly.
done.
Out crazy the crazy.
Well, good news, everyone. We're in the same location today. Isn't that great?
It's great for us. It doesn't really matter much to them.
I was waiting for them to respond, and there's no one to do that.
Nope. That's not how podcasts work.
So we're sharing a mic, and it's just kind of funny to me because we're sitting across from each other at a table, but we're also kind of leaning in. So it's almost like we're being really intimidating to the other person because there's also this lamp that's right above our heads, and right now it's shining down right on Brian's head, so he's really illuminated. So it feels very face off, standoffish, but I'm we're just relaxing. I don't get it.
Are we?
See? So that's where this episode's gonna be. I'm really excited for this. This is our second version of the podcast rewatch, where what we'll do is we'll watch an episode of TV and then we'll talk about that episode in depth. So we're doing an in-depth dive into one of the best, if not the best. I know it's your favorite Office episode, Dinner Party.
It's not my favorite, actually. I don't know what my favorite would be. I think this is the most iconic.
Okay.
And it's if you were gonna do an Office episode, the Office episode, I think there are a number of episodes that would be in the list. I think this would be at the top of one of those lists is what it is.
Yeah, I think in that top 5 for iconic, you've got, of course, Michael's Farewell, this episode, probably Goodbye Toby. Mm-hmm. And one I love is Benihana Christmas, but I don't know if that's iconic as much as these. So I have a Homerism for it, so that's why I wanted to include it. But we're talking about Dinner Party, and so we both rewatched this episode even today, and then I listened to the Office Ladies episode, where they rewatched this and they went into depth on that, and so I've got a lot of information. So I'm not going to cite them. I'm not going to be Office Ladies say this, because if you want to listen to the Office Ladies podcast and get all that information, you can go listen to the Office Ladies podcast. I won't be mad. It's all right. You're not cheating on us.
And you can listen to both of them. You can
exactly.
listen to us and them.
Why not? So I will reference some things from there, though, because they had some really good information, some great background stuff. There's some things I knew, and there's some things that it's oh, wow. So I'm really excited to talk about that, and just to talk about this great episode.
Yeah. And the thing about the Office Ladies is like I said, they say in their intro, they give you behind-the-scenes tips that no one else can give because they were there.
Yeah.
Especially in this episode, it's a lot of Pam and Angela in the same scenes, which they don't get a lot of throughout the series.
Yeah. And one point of view that I really love, that I probably won't take a lot of time to talk about it, but Angela Kingsbury is pregnant.
Kingsley.
What did I? Kingsbury?
Yeah, he said Kingsley.
I think I know a Kingsbury last name, so that's where So Kingsley. I know people. Shut up. So Angela Kingsley is pregnant during this filming of this show, and so she talked a lot about some of her personal stuff that was going on that I thought was really interesting from that perspective as well. So we'll mention some of that, and if you rewatch this episode, you'll be able to play the game Spot the Hiding of the Pregnancy Bump.
Well, awkwardly filming from over the banister.
Yeah.
Which, just right now, I thought of a big, weird flaw in this episode, but it's one of the few. I know they're doing the documentary stuff. It makes sense that they're at the office, but Michael and Jan invited the documentary crew into their house.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to it because I have one other thing about a few talking heads in the house. Anyway, so real quick before we even get into it too, so this episode, I think we've said before that it was written during the writer's strike, and that's not quite true, but it's really close to that. So they will have like 1 week to write each episode, except for like the season openers and things like that. But they had like this mid-summer break where the writers actually had 3 weeks to write this episode.
Yeah.
And so they had like, they didn't get paid for all 3 of those weeks because they got paid like it was like a normal week, but they just loved the concept so much that they kept coming back to this during their break, and they kept adding to it. So it really was like they took that full 3 weeks to write this. And then when they had the table read, and then the writer's strike happened, and so all of the cast and crew went on strike, or like they stopped filming in solidarity with the writers. So that's where that ties in, and this was one of the first, because I think it was Deposition and then this one were the first ones that were filmed right after the writer's strike ended.
You know, I forget if I heard this from the Office Ladies podcast, because I listened to that episode when it came out, but that was like a couple years ago now. Wasn't it they were saying that it was Steve Carell who decided not to cross the picket line because he had the kind of clout that he could do that, whereas like lesser actors could have been like, "Oh, you're just fired." Yeah. He knew that he had some weight to throw around, and he went in support of the writers because of that. Was that in that episode?
They didn't talk about that at all, but that doesn't surprise me.
I think they've talked about it in other episodes that Steve Carell, like, and for all what I've heard about it, he's like a really good guy in real life, and he did whatever he could to use his clout not to be like, I'm better than you. I was just listening to a podcast, and someone said that Donald Sutherland has a no eye contact policy. Like, no one can make eye contact with him when he's on the set. And it's like, well, that's ridiculous. On the other end, you have Steve Carell, who will like use his power for good.
Steve Carell has an only eye contact policy. You have to look me in the eye, really close. Smell my breath. Yep.
This will be a long one. We haven't even started talking about the episode
We
yet.
haven't. This episode is also directed by Paul Feig from Feig. The director. I'm just gonna get last names wrong this episode. That's where we're at. So he directed Bridesmaids as well as a number of other hit comedies, but that's one of his biggest.
And several episodes of The Office too.
Yep. He actually directed Survivor Man a couple before this, and then like he was proud of that episode, and then he read the script of this episode and was like, crud, I really would love, and he got jealous because he really wanted to direct this episode, and so they had this other director in the can, but then when the writer's strike happened and everything got pushed back, then that didn't work for this other director, and they didn't say who that director was, but it didn't work for this other director, and instead it did end up working for Paul, so he was able to actually direct this episode that he really wanted to.
That's awesome. And he's one of the few that, from what I hear, really got The Office. And he was one of the good people who can bring that essence.
Yep. So starting off the episode, we start off in the office, and we have we have the full cast in the office, but we see only 2 characters that aren't at the dinner party speak.
Yes.
As you pointed out as we were watching, that we had not Angela. We had Phyllis and Stanley have one line each.
Yep. And you can see Oscar, Kevin, Toby, and Kelly. They don't speak, and then, like I said, the rest of that cast is just gone.
Yep.
So, like, at the table read, do they just come in, they say like 2 things, and then like they just kind of sit back and take a nap for the rest of the episode?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's also their first exposure to the episode, too, so they're following along to see, like, oh, when's my next line? Oh, I don't have any.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they probably read it beforehand, knowing they don't have, I would guess.
I don't think so. I think table reads are just for that, is for all of them experiencing the episode together for the first time.
Huh. Okay.
And you'll see that with movies, too, and those sorts of things. So that they were just along for the ride. And so at the table read, apparently, like, no one was, like, able to laugh early on. It was just, like, kind of this building as they're like, oh, this is going to be kind of awkward. But, like, everyone had this appreciation. And then by the time the cops arrive, then everyone busts out laughing.
Yeah. Because
they've just been holding it in that whole time.
Well, like, a lot of these things that are there... On the page, they might not have been so funny, but it's the delivery and the visual.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I was wondering about this with like SNL skits. Some of those skits are hilarious because of strictly the visual aspect and the performance. Like, I'm wondering how they got there, because like the paper on the script would not be funny at all.
Yeah.
They just have to trust me. Bill Hader or whoever, they'll make this funny.
Yeah. And they, I think all the cast knew it was going to be funny, but because it focused a lot of them described it as dark a couple different times. They had Rainn Wilson on the episode, and he said it was kind of a dark script, and et cetera. And it's you don't think of this episode as being dark. You think of it as being cringe. But, if you strip it away and strip away the comedy elements, you do have a story of two fragile people that are putting others through a very uncomfortable time, and that their relationship is falling apart, and they're being verbally abusive to each other. So I get when you're saying that. We have one of our guests, Andrew Elmquist, he hates this episode for that reason. And so I get that, but I never thought of this episode as being dark.
No, we look at it. We look at from the lens of Michael and Jan's relationship is being imploded right now.
Yeah,
it starts out I don't know if they're faking it, but oh, she's my best trophy next to my Dundies or whatever. Oh, hey babe. And by the end, they're screaming at each other, and the Dundies are flying.
This episode is a great way to showcase building. I don't know if suspense is the right word, but
I think tension.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a pressure cooker. This whole episode is, and so there is going to be those points where it comes to a head, but you're just waiting, and it's just getting more and more uncomfortable. But that's part of the humor, there's a lot of tension relieving in that humor, but that tension is for sure there. And you feel that when you're watching this episode. But when they're starting off in the office here, then they all have this overtime assignment that really is, we know it's not really from corporate. Because first thing that Michael does, after he confirms that Jim does not have any plans for that night because he's sticking around to do this overtime assignment, he goes in the office and he has the phone call with corporate, quote unquote, and he starts yelling at him. It's this isn't fair to these people. These people are my friends. We're not going to work for you. And halfway through that phone call, you see that look of Jim, and he just looks at the camera. As soon as he says, these are my friends, he just shakes his head no.
He knows what's happening.
he gets it.
We have to suspend disbelief a little bit, because Michael would not be able to get away with this. You don't think Toby would know that this is not an actual corporate assignment? Or I feel Toby would see through it. Oscar would see through it.
Yeah, so this must be the greatest con Michael has ever pulled to get them to stay behind, but then also the genius idea that follows that when he cancels it and comes up to Jim. It's so what are you doing tonight then? He's I didn't have plans. He says, well, why don't you come to my house for dinner? Well, you didn't have plans. He cuts him off before he comes up with any excuse.
Yeah.
And Jim has that just realization on his face, followed by the talking head. He got me.
Which shows the state that Michael's at, because it's he did this whole thing because I think he knows that Jim and Pam don't want to have dinner with them, but he's still tricking them. It's I don't care if they don't want to come. I still want to hang out with them, because I don't know if he thinks that he's just going to be so charming that they're going to love it, or if he just doesn't care and he wants to have dinner with them.
Well, this is what cool people do. This is what adults do. This is when you've arrived. As a 35-year-old myself with 4 kids who just got a puppy, which is this is what old people do. My parents bought dogs. I didn't buy a dog. This isn't me.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome as you're turning into an adult. And so even at the age of 35, I'm this is an adult thing that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I can book myself a flight. I can pay for my insurance. I can, So I think having people over and entertaining and showing off is the way that you feel like an actual adult with actual friends.
It's been 9 years since we've legally had to pay for our own insurance, Matt.
I'll get around to it.
Okay.
It's fine.
I'm saying 26 is the cutoff for being on your parents' insurance.
So, after the credits roll and they get to the house, before they get there, I just want to highlight what I really love and what works about this episode is the dynamic of Melora and Steve together. Yes. And Steve Carell, he has this energy about him because he is so excited. Who knows how long he's been planning this, but he finally did it. He finally got Jim and Pam to his house. He finally gets to show off the things of his house. He gets to feel like they're actually real friends.
Yeah.
And all the things that he's believed and said in these talking heads of family has now come to pass.
And he gets Jan on board. Did Jan know about the whole con with the overtime assignment? Like, how much was she in on that? Is she like just like as crazy, let's say, as Michael because of this?
I don't know if she would have thought of that with the con, but that's where I'm curious about. It's like, what's her motivation in this? Because his is very obvious. We know he just wants friends. He's like this puppy and so excited that, hey, someone's here.
But, in the second and third seasons, we saw hints of Jan being crazy, especially like when she was like, making out with Michael at the David Wallace's house.
Yep.
But she was always more so the straight man. She'd be the boss who would come in, and she's very like professional and put together. And it's like, this is kind of really the unraveling of Jan. Like, this is what was behind that prim and proper boss all along. Like, diving into the depths of her psyche.
Yeah. So her dynamic of like him being so excited, she's got all these passive aggressive comments. She's got a lot of like, when they come in, one of the things that she says is like, oh, ignore these carpets. It's still in work. It's still in process. And a lot of like justification of like, oh, this isn't, this is Michael's idea. That's why it looks this way. Yeah. Or this isn't quite where I want it to be yet. So that's where I'm like, what is her complete motivation? Did she even want to have this dinner party? Or now that she has a dinner party, because Jan's motivation in general, is all about her. So what is her idea? What do you think?
I think that, for one, like I said, she is trying to pull Michael into like the high society and like make it seem nice. She's being passive aggressive to Pam. I think she wants to one up Pam because she somehow believes that Michael and Pam used to date. I don't know why she believes that. And she's also very clearly flirting with Jim. So she's trying to impress Jim, she's trying to one-up Pam, and she's trying to bring Michael up to high society. I don't think she gives two craps about Angela or Andy. Yeah,
like when they first show up, Jim... real quick, before I get even to that. So just the dynamic between them, like I was saying, that's why it works, is that it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever watched on the Oscars when Anne Hathaway and James Franco hosted, and Anne Hathaway was like... over the top, like, let me sell every line that I have, and just to make up for James Franco kind of being there like, I'm a stoner, and I'm gonna just read this joke like this.
Yeah.
Like, she felt like she had to overcompensate, and so it was really awkward, actually, to watch the Oscars and that dynamic, and it's a similar dynamic between them of, like, Michael just, like, all these things that he wants to show off and say, and then Jan, like, all of these jabs at either Michael or Pam or things about herself and Hunter.
Yeah.
And so that's where it really works. And props to Melora Hardin because, like, Steve Carell had that crazy energy. Yeah. And I actually want to say, like, it's almost like Jim Carrey handed off the torch to him in Bruce Almighty during that scene where he's making Steve Carell like say all these weird things on the teleprompter. Exactly. I was thinking about that today. I'm like, Jim Carrey hasn't done too many pictures quite like peak Jim Carrey since Bruce Almighty.
Yeah.
And Steve Carell has kind of taken over that like high energy, hilarious, over the top stuff. And he really is that manic energy in this episode for me.
Oh, he is. For sure. I feel like in Steve Carell's movies, he's sometimes more like subdued and straight, but with The Office, you get to see his crazy energy.
Yeah.
Unless he's being animated, like he'll as Gru or something.
Yeah. And yet, Melora Hardin is a beautiful equal to him in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
A foil, really. But, like, the energy she has, being very different, but is just as strong and just as dynamic, and that's what makes this episode so good.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So Jim and Pam first get to the house.
Yep, and then so what you'll notice is that like both Melora and Steve go to hug Jim, and then I shouldn't say the character's name, and then Michael hugs Pam, and Jan just ignores her and just walks right past her. And so then, like, the awkwardness starts even right away that Pam is like, oh, I brought this wine for you. And then Jan takes it's like, oh, this cooking wine. That's great.
Yeah.
And Pam just has this look of like, okay, well, thank you for the dig, but I'm not going to say anything and push through it.
Because they don't care. They just want to leave. But it's still, it's very clearly a dig, like you said.
Yeah, and so then they're going to go on the tour, and that's again that same writing of like, oh, look at this dig that we did, but we're going to let it go because we're civilized people, but it's just slowly building. They start walking up, it's the god awful carpet, and Michael's about to say something, no, he shakes it off.
Yeah, and it's also logistically, wouldn't they wait for all of their guests to do the tour?
Maybe. But they only care. They care about Jim and Pam. They care more about them.
But in universe, why do they even invite Andy and Angela? I mean, for story-wise, it's good to have more people in the mix, and Andy has some good moments. But why did Michael even invite Andy and Angela? Maybe it was a thing where like he was inviting Jim and Andy overheard, but we saw him invite Jim. I don't know.
Yeah. That's something that I actually want to highlight with Dwight when he shows up, because that seems a little out of character for Michael to like fight Jan about Dwight being there. Yeah, but we'll get to that in a second. So they go up for the tour, and then they go into, first of all, Jan's office, which a nice little production note is if you look at the office chair, like Michael makes the little snide comment, because he's also doing a couple jabs too. He makes a snide comment of like, oh, never been used, and Jan just kind of scoots past it. But you look at the office chair in there, and it actually still has like the wrapping on its arms. They never even have gotten that completely unpacked.
It kind of shows Jan, going back to like the money issues, is that Jan thinks she needs the high end of everything, even if she's not going to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And how selfish she is, that it's just like, oh, I've got both a workspace and a creative space, because they go into her candle room next.
Yes.
And so they're in the candle room, and oh man, you get that sense that there's like that smell, like that it's just terrible.
Yeah, it was like the candle aisle. It's hard because like, one candle is good, but you have all those competing smells all at once. It's like you have to like take a candle, go out of the aisle, and then you can really get do I like this candle or not.
Yeah, exactly. And being in that candle room, like it really did smell for all the actors in there.
I'm sure, yeah.
But of course they play it up, because you have to play it up since we can't smell it ourselves. We have to get from the reaction. And Jim has that nice little like almost gag look as he like holds his head outside of the room.
Yeah.
But then we get a little bit more of that building tension, because then Michael is he's like, oh, Jan's like, smell this. He smells it. It's fire, bonfire. And then Michael makes a James Bond fire. And he's doing like all that kind of joke and riffing. And Jan lets it go. But you can tell she's like, Michael's being that idiot that I know he is.
Yeah.
And then she says a comment about like, well, when I get irritated or frustrated, then I come in here. And it's like, there it is. It's like, it's still building. She's actually right now irritated and frustrated, but she's not going to address it right this moment because they have company.
Yeah. They're gonna try not to do it. They go into the bedroom next.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm with Michael on this. Those walls look white.
Yeah, and so we see Jan giving that, like, oh, I had to repaint this to this softer eggshell white.
And very subtly moving the video camera.
There you go.
Oh, don't mind this. And they both clock it.
Exactly. Right away. As soon as they get in there, everyone clocks it.
Well, Michael had already admitted to Pam and the other women that she likes to videotape them having sex she can view it with her therapist.
Yep.
So I forgot that Pam already knew that.
That's right.
And like, Jim and Pam weren't together at that point because that was season 3.
Yep.
So unless she remembered, Pam may have not told Jim about that.
Oh, I can see it going either way, because that's the sort of thing you're like, dude, this is what they do.
Yeah.
But it's also the sort of thing like, I don't want to think about that at all.
And I don't want to make Jim have to think about it.
That is completely fair. Okay, one of my favorite this episode is full of like, oh, this is my favorite part. This is my favorite part. This is my favorite part. One of my first hilarious parts of this episode is the little ottoman bench at the end of the bed, and like this perfectly sized bench where it's big enough that it actually works for Michael laying down, and it's small enough that the joke lands. And so they just like linger on that as he lays there, and it's so funny.
He can lay down, but only if he curls his legs up. He can't sprawl out.
Do you have like some sort of bench at the end of your bed? Some sort of accessory?
No, I don't. I have a king bed, so my bed is just his own bench.
Yeah. I have one at the end of my bed, not by choice. I'm married, so I mean, that's just... And then actually, our daughter has like a toy chest sort of thing at the end of her bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, apparently this is a pretty common thing to have just something at the end of your bed, which it makes sense.
Yeah.
But no, like to make someone sleep on that,
yeah.
that is so terrible.
That's the kind of thing where like it would make, oh, maybe the dog sleeps there, or like you sit down to put your socks on in the morning.
Yeah.
Something like that. Not, I'm an adult man paying for this condo, and I'm not even on the bed.
We definitely don't use ours as a semi-shelf of sorts at times. We have never done that. Our room is so clean.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of favorite parts, then goes to just, this is such a great scene. They continue the tour, and we see Michael's plasma TV, quote unquote.
First of two dated references. First, plasma. No one talks about plasma TVs anymore.
Yep.
That was when it was like a flat screen plasma was really cool and new, and now it's just there are TVs.
Yeah.
And the second one is the TiVo. Is TiVo even a thing anymore?
They do make a TiVo reference.
Is TiVo even a thing anymore?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it was... I don't want to say it was a streaming service before streaming services were a thing, but it maybe, in a way, was a grandfather of a streaming service.
Well, it wasn't streaming. It was just like, it was like cable. It would record your shows, but it would record it on its own. Like, I don't know if you've heard Patton Oswalt's bit about TiVo.
I haven't, but I knew someone who... I think the common joke is, like, if you, like, TiVo Will and Grace once, it will TiVo all these other, like, homosexual programs for you. And just automatically assume you're gay, because I've heard that happen in real life, and I've heard comedians talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do his bit because he also does it in imitation of a mentally challenged TiVo. I'm not going to do that. He does it, but the whole joke was like, you record a horse show with a horse on it, and then like you record all the horse shows that ever exist on TV, fill up your DVR.
Anything that's like vaguely connected to that, it's going to record. Yeah. So... But I think I'll still take the grandfather of streaming, because there's the connection between cable and streaming, but definitely streaming is a lot different than now. So I talked about the Office Ladies podcast, but I also want to talk about, because I've seen the bloopers, and the bloopers of this scene.
Oh, with the TV,
with the TV, it's so funny because John Krasinski cannot keep a straight face in this, and he. Like, went on record of talking about this scene, and he's like, I think we filmed like 19 to 20 takes before I could even make it through the scene without laughing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that makes sense based on these blooper reels. But he's like, this is one of my favorite jokes. Plus the energy of the set when they walked in was like, they were ready to do it. They were high energy, and it was just... everything was on the cusp of laughter because this was just such a phenomenal script for them. So it didn't take much to push them there.
Because it's so ridiculous and over the top, and Michael sells it, or Steve Carell sells it as such an earnest Michael.
It's such a good joke too. It's, pulling out the TV, and you pull it off the wall by like an inch, and it's like, oh, look at this, and then like to think it's so high scale, like, well, then we can just make room. Pushing it back, and it doesn't move at all. It like moves barely, and he thinks it's like the biggest thing in the world.
Do you think it would have been better if at some point later on someone pulled it out, and then Jim said like, "Whoa, it's too crowded in here"? Or do you think that would be too much?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. But this is one of those. Okay. This episode too, like, you can tell the care of 3 weeks worth of writing went into it.
Yeah.
Because there are so many great callbacks and setups through it. Like this setup with a TV is really, really funny in and of its own right.
Yeah.
But then it's gonna come back later, and there's multiple times in this episode that they do really good coming back.
It is, but it isn't like a Chekhov's gun, because it does bring your attention to the TV.
Yep.
But since it does the joke, you think, okay, maybe this is the end of it. You're not constantly thinking, oh, something's going to happen to that TV.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a really good use of the Chekhov's gun idea, because Chekhov's gun doesn't talk about foreshadowing as much as it is about the economy of storyline. And so they do talk about the Dundies here in this scene. They do talk about that plasma TV, which, real quick, it's not a plasma TV. It's a flat screen. There's a difference, and the fact that Michael thinks it's a plasma TV just adds to the humor of it. But they do show you those things, and it's like, they've showed you these, and they've made jokes about them, so they might as well use them again, because they've already created that in they've already used that in the economy of the storytelling. So,
true, yeah.
But then it continues on and shows the rest of this room. Like, Michael got this really crappy table that he's built, this side table that's just like sticks of lumber nailed together barely, and Jim like makes fun of him without him knowing. He's like, "Oh, Michael, I'm just terrible at all this stuff, so I think it's really cool that you can do this."
Yeah,
and he's got the I don't know, is this the Nordic cherry or pine or whatever? But you still have that dynamic between the two of them, especially when it gets to the Dundies and talking about the neon sign. And Jan is like, "Well, it had to be one of these," and they're laughing like they're best friends and that everything's great, but you can feel that weirdness.
Yeah, and then now looking forward, you can tell like Holly's gonna let Michael be Michael.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is a good time too to bring up that point of that. You just look at the set decoration of this house, and like we're gonna get to the garage in a little bit where all of Michael's stuff is, but the set decoration is like it took any warmth out of this house. The way that Jan has put it together, I think a deleted scene even says something about like how he's trying to help Jan calm her down at a point, and it says, "Honey, you made this house like a museum," and it's like that really is what they're going for, to feel so cold. The home has become a house instead of the other way around. Yeah,
and going back to like the money episode, this you can see all the expensive decorations and stuff would probably went into them having money issues.
Yeah, and then the other side of it, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the other side of it too with that is when they're in the garage, there's like a Bowflex in there. There's a meat dehumidifier or something, whatever. Meat dryer maybe. But it's like all these like made on TV or made for TV advertisement infomercial stuff that Michael would order on an impulse for no reason and never use.
Well, the Bowflex is a prop from his movie.
That's right. And hey, he does get it. He does get the use of it. So.
Yeah, because then he came back later. I think was it Holly that wanted him to sell it?
It might have been
at the garage sale episode.
She wants him to sell the sign. I know.
Yeah, I know the beer sign comes back.
Yeah. So we raised an interesting question because Holly will let Michael be Michael, but she's also a grown woman and a mature person who will also be like, as the age that we're at, we don't need a neon beer sign.
Yes.
So there's a little of the give and take too.
Yeah. Are you literally a bar? No. Then you might not need a neon beer sign. In my opinion.
That's a nice flow chart. All right. Well, now we get Andy and Angela walking in. Angela hidden behind the banister because she, as we said, is pregnant. There's this huge bouquet of flowers that anytime we see Angela, it's right in front of her.
Or her purse.
To protect her. And then Andy takes off this giant coat, and he's got on like 3 levels of like a turtleneck and a sweater around his neck and all this sort of stuff.
It's the preppy uniform.
It is.
Okay, this starts the whole another secret runner through the episode called I can't tell if Andy is uncomfortable at any point.
Yes, that is a great point because the way Ed Helms acts is it really could go either way.
Yeah.
Because Andy is a yes man, and Andy is a good actor in being a yes man.
Yeah.
So he's going along with stuff half the time, like when we see him pitch the investment opportunity.
Yeah.
But then we also see his face of like, oh, this isn't good. I don't like what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So,
but like, through those charades, I mean, he's legitimately playing charades. He's not messing with him like the way Jim is.
He's just bad at it.
Yeah. Joe Camel. We'll get to it. Well, I think we're about to get there.
Yeah. The division of teams in that is really well done. But before we get there, we just find out, oh no, it takes 3 hours to make this. What is it? Ossobuco? Is that
Ossobuco?
Ossobuco. I'm just going to pronounce things wrong this whole episode, so let's all just get used to it right now. So Jean and Pam are waiting. So they get this revelation 3 hours long, and they both look at each other. And this is another start of a great storyline and payoff. I don't know if great story, but the Pam being hungry.
Yeah.
I love what it builds to and the joke that we're going to get at dinner. Mm-hmm. But you have so much compassion. Like, I'm I don't know if I want to say foodie because that kind of implies like high-end food, but I just, I like to eat as a human being. And so you take away my food for a long period of time, I'm going to be upset. So I'm like, I'm Team Jim and Pam 1,000 more times % than I was 5 minutes ago.
We were already on Team Jim and Pam, but even more so. Like you can just imagine being hungry. Yeah. Like I would try to like find some reason to go run an errand, run to the gas station, get a candy bar or something.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the deleted scenes is Pam sneaking a granola bar and then Jan catching her. And poor Jenna Fisher had to eat like 10 granola bars worth because Paul comes up to her and he's like, you got to act like you're actually really starving. Like this is the meal that you've been waiting all day for. And so she had to scarf down that granola and do it multiple times. So she walked away with a lot of granola in her system after that.
I'm sure she did.
All right. So then afterwards, they're all sitting around together, drinking wine. Steve gives an improvised line about the Okie afterbirth.
That was improvised?
That was improvised.
That was one of the many things in this episode that's like, this is what you remember from the member. This is the line. There's like a bunch of them. This is one of them.
And it's a really unusual, like it's a good joke, but it's like an out of left field joke.
Yeah, like even Michael, okay, the word birth is in there. I don't think it's supposed to be in there.
But let's talk about, because what happens right after that is listening to a nice song. Brian, let's talk about the Hunter song.
You mean Take Me by the Hand?
That's the one. So this song was not actually sung by Nicholas D'Agosto, who played Hunter in the... For as big of a deal as Hunter was, the actor was only in, I think, one episode.
I thought it was 2.
He might have been in 2. I only remember... Because maybe it was like his voice over the phone.
I'm going to check what IMDb says right now.
Feel free. By the way, real quick, before we even get there, or while you're checking that, did you know I went to go see the first Avatar movie with Nicholas D'Agosto?
I did not.
Okay, so I wasn't with him, but we go there, and if you'll notice, his hometown is Council Bluffs, Iowa, and that's where I went to see this movie, and I see him walking with a group of friends. I'm like, that's Hunter. That's Hunter from The Office. And I'm standing up, and I was going to go over and just like be like, hey, I know you. Which I'm sure he would have loved.
Yeah.
He, like, the lights go down and the movie starts. And so I'm like, that's a cool claim to fame for me. I get to talk about how he was in 3
episodes.
3 episodes. So, guys, I know you're all jealous out there. He didn't take me by the hand, but I felt like a man as I watched Avatar.
Okay, then.
That was a weird... Yeah. Anyway, so he was not the singer of this song, which I always wondered, but that was confirmed today. It was actually the singer of the band, the New Pornographers. Huh. So they sang that. I have 2, and I can't remember what the song was that I knew from them apart from this. But they recorded that song, and so Jan's dancing to it, and she's dancing on her own, and everyone's just kind of feeling awkward, except for Andy, who's getting into it, adding his little another improvised bit. And after a couple takes of doing this dance, Paul pulls Melora aside and says, "Hey, this time try and pull Jim into it." So without anyone else being aware of it, as she starts dancing, she like grabs Jim's hand, and as she's like twirling around, and John Krasinski reacts like a champ and just is like, nope, I'm not joining this. And that's, I think, what captured that awkward feeling of that scene so well.
He knew to play along in the scene is to not play along, because that's what Jim would do.
Absolutely.
If he got up and danced with that, would be so out of character and not nearly as funny.
Yes. Yep. So then after the song gets done, she goes and sits, and they start doing some Pam bashing, which of course Angela joins in on. And Angela, her small talk is judging people.
Yeah. Like, is Angela messing with Pam, or is she just being herself?
She's being herself. Because Angela is so deluded. Like, calling Pam the office mattress when she was the one who was engaged to 2 guys at the same time in the office.
And
sleeping with.
Sleeping with one while engaged to another.
That's it, yes.
And whereas, Pam was in a serious relationship with Roy, and then a serious relationship with Jim.
Exactly.
At different times.
Yes. 100%.
And the only overlap is one kiss that Angela doesn't even know about.
There you go. Way to go. Gosh, that double standard makes me mad. Like the Phyllis line of like, "Oh, I couldn't see your hands," and both of their hands are on the table, and then like Jim holds up his hands like, "They're right here."
Yeah.
So anyway, they mocking Pam. We cut to that talking head when she's in the bathroom. Great line that I love. They're like, "I just want to eat," which I realize is a lot to ask for at a dinner party.
Which again, you might think they're escaping into the bathroom, saying they need to use the bathroom, but the camera crew's in there.
That was my thought when you were talking about the camera crew earlier. So what does the rest of the guests think, especially Jan and Michael?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to bring this camera guy in here with me, and it'll be fine.
Did they mention that in the Office Ladies podcast?
They did. They talked about this small bathroom, because if you look, they're actually in this guest bathroom in a condo. They're absolutely filming in it. There's the director and the cameraman, and either Pam or Jim, because they also film a talking head with Jim in here too. Yeah. And like Paul's sitting like on the sink. And like just shoved up, and they're in this just tiny little room trying to get this, and like he's like, and they're both busting out laughing because they love these lines.
Okay, I'm gonna give a possible explanation that I know is wrong and doesn't make sense, but here we go.
Sounds good.
Michael and Jan have a camera set up in their bathroom for also crazy, inappropriate reasons.
Oh no, I hate this theory already.
Jim and Pam were just talking to themselves, and then it ended up recording it, and then later on these tapes were donated to the
they're looking right at the camera.
Yeah, they're using the camera as like a focal point just to talk, not realizing that the cameras in the bathroom are just always on.
I hate your theory. I hate your theory so much for so many reasons. All right, here's another very great iconic scene. Is I don't know if I use iconic right, but it's memorable. It's the charades scene. Go ahead, Brian. You walk us through it.
Well, Andy is doing charades, and his thing is Joe Montana. And instead of doing Joe Montana, he somehow mimes Joe Camel, like the camel. Oh yeah, and cigarettes, Joe Camel. Okay, that's the first name. Second name is the state where. What's the capital of Montana?
Helena.
Helena is the capital. And then was it Pam? She's like, why don't you just say 49ers quarterback? Exactly.
And that's where like the breakdown of teams is actually really, really smart how they did it. Because, him being so bad at this game works with Pam and Jan because they would actually like guess correctly.
Yes.
Versus Michael being bad in a different way, and Angela knowing nothing about pop culture, and Jim just finding some sort of scrap of fun he can have in the evening because he's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Doesn't Angela say something like, "Who are these people? I don't know anything."
What are you talking? And then Michael is like, my turn, and Jan like calls him out like, "You're being way over the top." And so then both Jan and Michael are like using Jim as their evidence, like, "Oh, Jim was laughing. No, Jim's not laughing." And the camera just keeps going to Jim, and he looks dead. His face is like, "Please, I don't want to be here."
So like I was looking at Jim's face, and I was looking at Jim's face. There's not a smile. And Jim's just like, why am I the attention right now?
I love his line in his talking head. Michael and Jan seem to be playing their own game called "How Uncomfortable Can I Make My Guests?" And they're both winning.
Yeah. So here we have Jim, and then actually Jim making a very non-Jim move.
Correct. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, at first it is a Jim move because he gets this call. Not really, but he fakes a call that his apartment's getting flooded, and him and Pam have to go and deal with it. So at first, that's okay. That's valid. Everyone understands. And Michael poses the question, "Well, you don't need both of you." And then Jim does his very uncharacteristically Jim,
like ditching Pam. He's gonna ditch Pam. You can see he thinks about it for a second. He's like he realizes there's no way to get Pam out of here, is there?
Yeah,
but I can get me out.
I get it. Like, yeah, that's not a good look, but at the same time, like, this isn't the worst thing Jim has done. But at the same time, he's hungry, he's stressed from this, he's uncomfortable, and I think knowing how Jim is, that, and him having faith in how smart Pam is, that like she'd be able to find a way out, or that like if he leaves, then he can like call her phone and come up with another plan. So I think I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there, but it does create for a really good Pam moment because she's like, no way are you going to do this to me. Yeah. And she makes him stay with her little chess move here.
Yeah. She says, no way you're going to abandon this party. And he knows she's saying, you're not going to leave me here.
Exactly. And you can always have new things. You can't ever buy a new party.
Yeah.
And just like the sarcasm in that voice. There's like sarcasm and anger and like...
And Michael's just like, that's right. You got to stay.
It's great. And then they both give each other a great look. I like Pam's like, ha, I won. And Jim's like, yeah, you did win. And it seems like it's in good fun because it's comedic, but it's, And
realize we're halfway through the episode. We still haven't had any Dwight outside of the cold open yet.
Exactly. So after that little moment is when Michael's doing the guessing. The Tom Cruise, which I love. I love his hints. Yeah. Okay, his first name Tom, and he's going on a cruise.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like Katie Holmes. Oh, but he's married her. Dawson's Creek. It's got to be a real person.
Exactly. Rhymes with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. And then that's when Angela says, like, who are these people? She doesn't even know Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Exactly. And that is on brand for Angela.
Yeah.
These aren't helpful.
Yeah.
And so, they fail, and then after that we do a quick cut, and everyone's silent.
Yes.
All of the momentum of the night, if any, is dead. And so as they're sitting there just waiting for the dinner to get ready, Pam shivers a little bit. Michael sees it, unprompted, walks over, gives her a coat, and Jan just fires daggers at them both.
And then we kind of get like the jabbing back and forth between Michael and Jan. This is when Jan decides to tell on Michael that he was chasing after the ice cream truck when he ran through the screen door.
Yes.
Which is such a Michael thing. And I think it's better we don't see that. I think another show like Family Guy would have cut back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Family Guy 100% would have. Especially those type of shows that all their jokes are cut away humor.
Yes.
And so you're right. It's good to not see a version of that. But this is like really the first fight that we get. Because they have like 3 big fights.
Yes.
And so this was the first that seems like, okay, after they get this out, then maybe they'll be good. Because after she does the joke about him and kind of poking fun, he's like, oh, I love ice cream, so sue me. No, wait, don't sue me, because she loves to sue people.
Which is called back to the deposition.
Exactly.
Which is tension because he chose Leonard Mifflin over her.
Exactly, yeah. There's that play off of that tension, absolutely. And so then they're doing the jokes of like, oh, she's the devil, and I'm in hell, and that sort of thing. And actually, that was the writer's intention with this show. So this episode, they kind of had the theme, and they had their inspiration. Their inspiration was a play that was turned into a movie called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Yeah.
And the show is actually, this episode is almost called Who's Afraid of Jan Levison Gould, to draw that direct parallel. But as they're writing, they're like, my intention is to showcase how much of a hell Michael's in. And so they really go on the nose with the dialogue here of like, I'm in hell, she's the devil. Like, that is the theme of this episode, to show you she is torturing him by just being around.
Yeah.
So after that, then they go into the kitchen for some girl time. And their big fight, they go in the kitchen. Angela gets stolen. Pam goes in. Angela's like, "Oh, great," because that's not girl time. Is that on her? Is that on her bingo card for what she wants to do in a day?
No, never. This is also getting Angela out of there so that Michael could do what he's about to do with the guys in the garage.
Exactly. Yeah. Real quick too, just the highlight as we're talking about her being the devil. If you notice, like, there's so much red around. You see, like, all the kitchen pots that she's using are red. She's wearing red right now. It's a very bright red lipstick.
And when she said, "I'm the devil," there's like the fireplace right behind her.
Yeah, there you go. Glad you caught that. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So then they're in the kitchen. They're just discussing. Angela is hidden behind a little ledge that they're like, thank God this condo had it. We thought we were going to have to build this little ledge protruding out to hide the belly. Mm-hmm. But they're in the kitchen, and that's when we hear Jan flat out say, "Oh no, you and Michael used to be a thing. Don't, like, you guys used to date, right?"
Yeah.
And Pam's just like, yeah. Wait, what? And so Pam tries to get I have never dated him. I don't want to date him. And Angela adds in oh, I see the way you look at him.
But didn't Jan know that she was engaged to Roy? Like, when would she have been with Michael?
Well, I mean, she was engaged to Roy, but now she's with Jim. So
yeah, but when's the timeline? Because would she know that she's been with Roy like probably since like high school days?
Well,
the timeline just doesn't add up.
Do you think Jan was faithful with Michael?
Well, no.
So cheaters project that that other people cheat too.
I suppose. Well, I mean, that whole song was basically just like about Jan and Hunter.
Yeah. No, what? That doesn't. Track.
I think I picked up on the very subtle hint.
Of course. Okay. Yeah. So you're right. The next scene, they pull him into the garage, and it's just the guys. I love seeing like all the Michael stuff, all of those impulse purchases, multiple hand chairs, which they easily could have been the focal piece of his living room. I would not put that past Michael.
Oh, absolutely. That's where. And then the Bowflex would have been, instead of a dining room table, he would just have the Bowflex in there.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, they probably would.
Yeah.
Andy has maybe my favorite line of his in this episode when Michael is doing the pitch of like, just you can get in on this ground floor. Think about it. Thought about it? I'm in.
Yeah, for $10,000. That just shows like how still stuck in like the trust fund rich parents thing that Andy's at, that he doesn't have to think about. He can use $10,000 to suck up to his boss.
Absolutely. Brian, have you ever had someone who you haven't talked to for a while and they come back into your life like, hey, I just wanted to hang out with you and talk. And then as you're talking to them, like, I've got this great opportunity for you. And you're like, oh, so we're just hanging out so you can pitch me on your pyramid scheme?
I've had messages on Facebook.
Okay.
But not in person.
I've had messages on Facebook mainly. I've had like one or two in person that I was just like, no, one in person, one over the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, thank you that you care about me this much. And like, it's so uncomfortable to be pitched to when you can't leave. And so I'm sure that's what the writers are going for. Is like, what's another thing that we can do? Oh, let's have him pitch them on investing.
So what's the timeline here? So Michael wants to have the dinner party because he wants to have friends. Jan obviously clearly wants to get the money for Serenity and Jan. Like, did Jan go to Michael or did Michael go to Jan? Where did this idea come to have like the divide and conquer there?
See, I never, when I was watching this episode, I never went into it thinking like that was the whole reason was for Jan to do that. But now that we're like unpacking this a little bit, it does seem like out of character for Jan to put up with all of these office weirdos, except for Jim. He's the only one that like can actually, she would be fine with communicating with.
Yeah.
And so to have all of these others at their house should have some other purpose. And I think that you're right in hitting on that. It's probably for that reason. Yeah,
I mean, they clearly talked about it beforehand because Michael even says, getting my rich friends, which I don't know if we should talk about that later or now.
We can talk about it now.
Okay, rich friends. Okay, yeah, Andy is, he's from money.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's a trust fund baby.
But, like, Jim and Pam work at Dunder Mifflin. He knows what they make. He's their boss.
They're dinks. Double income, no kid.
Yeah, but that's just different than having unlimited income.
And Dwight is surprisingly rich for the lifestyle that he has.
Yeah.
He has a lot of money.
Yeah. He's like the Ron Swanson. He doesn't show it.
This wasn't Jan's idea to bring Dwight, too.
True. So, was it all just to get Andy's money?
Easily could be. I think she would probably know that Andy or that Jim and Pam are too smart for that. I don't know. We're giving a lot of logic benefits of the doubt to a woman who is absolutely insane. So
true, and she only gets more insane from here.
She hasn't even reached her final form yet. Oh no!
After this season, you realize, fun fact, we only see Jan and Roy in odd number seasons. They show up in season 5, 7, and 9.
You're blowing my mind right here. Never knew that. These are things that I don't notice and pay attention to. But we do get, finally, Rainn Wilson, we get Dwight back in the episode, him showing up with Beth Grant, actress Beth Grant. I don't remember what her character's name is in this, but she's his former babysitter.
And current lover.
I guess we don't learn that yet. But they show up. So this is where, like, I had felt like it was maybe just a little bit off of Michael's characteristic. He does want people to like him, but he also doesn't like that any of those people are Dwight.
Yeah.
And so for him to be so adamant that Dwight would be allowed to stay at this, and even it seems like he kind of planned this too. Like, I know that Dwight came up to him at the office like, oh, it's couples only, but they must have had more communication because the only problems that Michael had were what Jan told him of the glasses and not enough food and
needing a person.
And Dwight thought ahead of that.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that was coincidence. I think Michael told them these are the problems you need to solve, and then you can come. So that doesn't feel like he would have taken Dwight's side over Jan's on that, even if he is miserable with Jan right now.
Yeah, I agree completely.
All right, but this next scene, okay. So real quick, this scene has like the best line of this episode, maybe of the whole series. When they're having their fight, it's never what I want, and she's like, well, it's always what you want. You always get your way. It's like, well, when I wanted to see Stomp, we went to see Wicked, and when I wanted to have kids, you said get a vasectomy, and then when you said you wanted kids, and I wasn't so sure, then I got it reversed. And so the snip snap line,
another iconic line.
Great line. Like, that line in and of itself is good, but Steve Carell's delivery of it takes it from being a good line to being just the funniest line ever. Mm-hmm. Now, here's my jaw drop that I found out.
Yeah.
That is Steve's line. That was improvised by him.
The snip snap?
Yes. That was his contribution. Because if you pay attention to this scene, this is a full-on fight with very little humor apart from that line.
Yeah.
And that there's not enough funny in this scene, and they were realizing that they're like, this is getting a little too much on the uncomfortable side. We need a joke in here.
Yeah.
And so they told Steve that, and he came up with this, and that line ends up being one of the greatest lines in the show.
Yeah,
just speaks to the genius of Steve Carell. But not that we needed more proof.
Oh yeah.
But then that scene ends with her just throwing her hands up in the air. It's like, fine, you want to have a kid? Let's have a bleeping kid. And then Michael's like, wait, really? And she just walks away. I hate my life.
Yeah.
And like, there are some good things that they deleted, because there are some deleted scenes where it's like you see her crying and Michael trying to console her, and he's not good at it, but he's just doing his best. And I'm like, I could see you being more on Jan's side with those scenes left in, so it probably is good that they deleted it.
Yeah.
But like, just a moment like that, you do maybe feel a little bad for her, even if she is the culprit in a lot of this pain and misery between the two of them.
Well, and then doesn't that scene also end with a button of like, Dwight's here?
Yeah, and with Dwight saying, so can we come in? Like, just how unaware Dwight is.
Yeah.
As soon as the fight's done, he's just like, you guys didn't answer the question.
And I love Pam's awesome.
That's true. One of the highlights for her of the night is when Dwight shows up, because she's like, okay, maybe this absurdity, this chaos might be enough to alleviate all the focus and cringe on us.
Yeah.
I get that. That's great. All right. So after the commercial break, we come back and they are sitting around the table. Now, this is the part that I really, really appreciated of hearing from Angela Kingsley, her point of view, because when they're filming this scene, she's talking about how her daughter Isabel, who was in her room at the time, was just going nuts, like just moving around, kicking left and right. She's like, I was actually having a really hard time focusing on this scene, and while they were rolling at a certain points and the cameras weren't on us, she's like, I grabbed Ed's hand and I put his hand on my belly, and he could feel it, and he just she's like, he stopped being Andy for a second, looked over at me and like mouthed, "Oh my god," because like the kid was, and I'm like, that just like, if you're a mom out there, that's props to you, because you're able to do amazing things, especially when you have a kid who's like, yeah, I'm just gonna like kick your liver 9 times in a row inside of you.
So women don't like when I kick their liver down.
Yeah, they don't like that when we do it, but when the kid does it. But yeah, that's a point of view that you don't get from only 2 guys talking about his show. So I really appreciated Angela's weighing in and her personal story on that. But we see Dwight and his babysitter already starting in on their food, eating their beet salad and his turkey leg while everyone else is waiting, and the uncomfortableness of him. So he's clearly there, like, focused on Angela, because even when the babysitter, whatever her name is, pipes up, he's like, hey, and then he goes back to talking to Angela. Like, you don't care about her at all. She's just a body in the seat for you.
Which, is when he says, I've seen you, when she says, the thought of putting one of your beets in my mouth makes me want to vomit. Is that a euphemism?
It feels like one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that was the intention. It probably was, but it really feels like that's a euphemism. The subtext of that.
Yeah.
So after this is one of my favorite Pam lines in the show, because Michael leans over right before it's finally time for her to eat. She's been waiting, she's been starving, and you feel all of that pain for her. And then Michael makes a comment like, I hope that Jan didn't poison the food. I can't prove anything, but I think she's been poisoning me.
Yeah.
And then the food comes out with no further explanation, no follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And so Pam, this great payoff of two different things. Like, this is, again, great writing because we've established her hunger and we've established Jan's distrust of Pam.
Yeah.
And so for both of them to come together in one line in a talking head, she's like, I know Jan didn't poison the food. I know that. But if she's to poison the food to someone at that table, wouldn't it be me, Michael's former lover?
Yeah.
I love that line. Favorite Pam line, I think, overall.
Yeah. And it causes her not to be able to eat still.
And you feel so bad, and it sucks. And so, like, when she does, skipping ahead, when she does get that burger in the episode, you feel so happy for her. Like, good, Pam, you finally got to eat.
Yeah. Continues, and this is where we kind of get into, like, the build of, like, the third big fight between Michael and Jan. And how does it start off again? Is it the beer sign right away?
Yeah. So right before the beer sign, the catalyst, if you will, it seems so small because Michael is dipping his meat into his wine. Now, again, just to bring up Office Ladies, because we haven't done that enough this episode.
Yeah.
When they're talking about this, Jenna Fisher brings up this comment about like how there's a guy that she dated who would like drink milk with everything and so when she starts to go into that, then Angela like freaked out for a second. She's like, I thought you were about to say that you dip your food into beverages and like your meats, and I was gonna like freak out on you. And I like, as they said that, I realized how weird that was of what Michael was doing.
Yeah. Because
in my mind, I just kind of auto-filled. I've never drank wine, so I don't know that taste, but my mind just kind of auto-filled that it was like a more tart. I know this isn't true, but that it was like a more tart, like steak sauce. And like the only reason for that being is that I just figured it was like a weird taste thing that's like, because I dip my steak. I know that this is blasphemy for some of you steak lovers out there. I will dip my steak in steak sauce. I like A1. I will consistently order A1, even if you think that just overpowers the taste of the steak. So I find nothing wrong with that. So when he was dipping into the wine, I'm just like, oh, it's probably something similar enough to that. But apparently, that's a really weird thing to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's when Jan just tells him not to do it. He's like, babe, you know I have soft teeth. And her little line of like, oops, like, oh, what did I do? Just like such a jerk delivery is what causes Michael to go get that. And Michael
was dipping him. He wasn't making a show about it. He was being pretty subtle about it. He could have just not mentioned it.
Yeah. I mean, it's still inappropriate for a dinner, I'm sure. Especially that fancy dinner. But, you know, it's whatever. So, you're right. We thought that we had, especially with the big blowout when Dwight got there, we thought that the fighting was done. Because sometimes you just need to have the fight, you get it out, and then you can move past it.
Yeah.
But clearly not. And Michael just puts up that St. Pauli's girl sign and illuminates the whole room, and props to the lighting department to like be able to balance the right balance for this.
Like Jan's face is purple in this scene.
Yeah, seriously. And so like the whole thing, like this just devolves everything. That Jan tries to maybe pull like, oh hey babe, the bad line, the bad name, and that, hey babe, maybe we don't do that here. Just tries one more little modicum of civility, and it doesn't work.
No.
And so then she goes off. She turns on Hunter. She turns on Hunter's song.
She already did that.
Exactly. That's a long time ago. She turns on the song, and she just like closes her eyes as like. It's like she's like fantasizing while she's standing there and everyone's eating dinner. It's like so gross and weird, and she's just
it's her version of Skylar White walking into the pool.
Yeah, no, it's her version of Skylar White. IFD, no, IFT. I blanked Ted.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
sorry. I was like,
that's what the episode was called, IFT, which stood for. I blinked Ted. So yes, it's her. That's her sort of thing. So then, of course, Michael starts talking over the music. Oh, I don't think he's that talented. I wrote a screenplay.
Yeah. This is like the lines of this fight. It's like, I'm a screenwriter, but you'll hear me bragging about it. No, then she says I'm a candle maker.
But you don't hear me bragging about it.
No, but you see me getting my rich friends to invest in.
For an investment opportunity.
Yeah.
And then she has that. You burn it, you buy it.
I could be your first customer. You're hard to get first. That's what she said. The most angry. That's what she said.
Yes.
Ever. Michael still can't help himself.
And so then she goes, grabs the Dundee, destroys his beloved flat screen. Like the ramping up of this whole episode with that huge fight, and gosh, I love his line. The good luck paying me back on your $0 a year plus salary plus benefits, babe.
Yeah, he kept the babe in there.
Oh my gosh! And of course, the babysitter is the one who's not at all attached to this. Like, you know what? I'm gonna go. And sets everyone free to finally leave before the cops show up.
Yeah.
All right, so cops show up. Dwight is like, "Oh, I'll handle this," and like, "Not now, Dwight." He goes off. Michael has to then talk with them, and I really love the pressing charges line. Where it's like, will she get in trouble? Well, she'll be charged. Okay, then I did it. I'll take the fall, dude. You can just not press charges.
Yeah,
there's some good lines there, and so then obviously Michael has to. The cops ask, "Is there anywhere else you can stay?" But I think it's a good point if you look at Michael that like maybe he would have just gone right back inside until Jan comes back out and he sees her again. And is like, "Oh yeah, I can't go back in there."
Yeah, that's why he agrees to go home with Dwight. And doesn't Dwight end up charging him?
I don't know if he does.
I think a couple episodes later we have him charged. You took up the America room for 2 weeks or something.
That's in line with Dwight for sure. I really like too do you have somewhere you can go? And Dwight throws his hand heartily on the shoulder of the cop for all people. I'll take him. Yeah. Like that he's this Michael giant hero. Yeah. And then he just looks at Jim and Pam like, can I stay with you guys? Like, no, our apartment's on fire.
I mean, flooded.
And Pam remembers the line. No,
which that's a callback too, because they set that up for them to be able to get out of Michael staying with them.
Exactly. It's good. And then they go off, and then we have that little tiny montage at the end. With Jim and Pam getting the hamburgers.
It's kind of like a Scrubs Zach Braff voiceover, but it's Hunter's song instead.
Exactly. Yeah. I like when they're listening to it, it's like, babe, I want you to know I did something bad. He holds up the CD that he stole it from him. They're listening to it, and so, that one night, and I think Pam goes, one night, and he's just like, I love that.
Yeah. They're singing. Angela and Andy are having ice cream, and Andy tries to be cute, and she like smears it on his car.
So this is the other funny thing too, hearing about it. So apparently, like while they were filming that scene, they had to film it a couple different times, and so in between each take, that Ed and Angela are just sitting in the car together, and they have to like wipe down the side because it's got the former ice cream on it. Yeah. Anyway, Ed can't hold one in, and he farts, and it's so terrible to Angela's poor pregnant nose, and she has to get out of the car and is like wrenching it, and Ed's like, I'm sorry. And all the cast back there is like, well, we know what happened. If she's out of the car, we know what had to happen.
I should have gone back. I haven't listened to that podcast in like a couple of years. That's why I don't remember any of this. But yeah.
I bet that was one of their favorite episodes of the podcast to talk about, because
I'm sure, yeah.
when the episode first came out, like NBC first, when they had the table read, NBC gave them a call like shortly after, like, is this really the way you want to do this episode? That they weren't sold on it. They thought it was a little bit too far. And so, but this was their fourth season. They're a hit show. They've won awards. So at that point, they were able to be like, no, this is going to work.
Yeah.
And NBC was able to trust them. And so they let them go ahead. And then the episode aired, and there was such a divided fan base because it is uncomfortable in ways the first time you see it. But then when you know what to expect, you can go back into it and you can enjoy it more for what it is. Mm-hmm. So I think the way that we should end this episode, too, is to real quick highlight the cringe of this versus the cringe of Scott's Tots. And I want to ask you, why does this episode work and Scott's Tots, in a lot of people's opinions, doesn't?
I think it's because the victims of here are characters who either don't get it that bad. Like Jim and Pam have one awkward night. Mm-hmm. It's not that bad, Or like Jan and Michael, they kind of deserve it. They're kind of all being terrible. Whereas Scott's Tots, the victims are like these innocent high schooler teenagers who don't deserve what's coming to them.
That was really succinct, and I 100% agree. Would have never thought... I don't think I would have thought to have those words and put that to words, because I think you're absolutely right about victims. Because the other thing I didn't like about Scott's Tots, and I realize actually Dinner Party has the same thing, is that the B storyline of Scott's Tots is the whole Employee of the Month fiasco that is like against Jim, and so Jim again suffers. So there's not really, like, in that episode, there's not really a lightening moment. Mm-hmm. Whereas I thought Dinner Party had that, and I was like, wait, no, Dinner Party is the same thing. Whereas Dinner Party is kind of like a slow build. So I think that's the other thing that makes Dinner Party better than Scott's Tots, is because there's the build up. Yeah. And the release, whereas like with Scott's Tots, you know the stakes right away, and it's just kind of like you're dreading those stakes. It's kind of like going up a roller coaster, that first hill, and you're like, he's gonna eventually have to tell him, I'm so uncomfortable. When are you gonna tell him? When are you gonna tell him? And you know it's coming. Whereas Dinner Party, sure, you know it's coming, but it's kind of funny how it unfolds, and the ridiculousness of it getting bigger and bigger and more absurd.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the other part of it, too, is that because these characters are so absurd in Dinner Party, and sure, that's an absurd premise in Scott's Tots, but we've actually, like, it's been inspired by, like, Warren Buffett or other very big businessmen who have said those sorts of promises or have made that charitable contribution. And for someone to do that and then not be able to follow through on it, like, that is realistic, even if that probably is never going to happen.
Yeah.
So that is Dinner Party. That is a great episode. Again, go back and watch it if you hadn't done that before this. Yeah. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the episode, that this is one of those episodes that even if you're not an Office fan, you can come into this episode and maybe have like a 30-second crash course of some of the dynamics of characters. Someone tell you those dynamics ahead of time. But overall, you can come into this dry versus like the Breaking Bad episode we did, where you can't really go into that and really appreciate it for what it is.
Also, if you ever think you're overpaid in your job, just remember, like, Mindy Kaling and Paul Lieberstein, Oscar Nunez, Brian Baumgartner. Yeah, they all got paid for this episode.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that should do it, and I think we should probably jump into trivia. What do you say? All
right, last week we talked about divas, and one of the divas we talked about was Miss Piggy, and I said, who did Frank Oz share the performing duties of Miss Piggy with in the first season of The Muppet Show before she became his full-time character? And it was performer Richard Hunt. So in the first season, if it's Miss Piggy but does not sound like Miss Piggy, that's because it's Richard Hunt.
Hey, I was just talking with Angie the other day. We were talking about Christmas movies that lived in our brains that we saw like a long time ago in the 90s, and then like made-for-TV type movies. Yeah. Do you remember a Jim Henson made-for-TV movie from the 90s with some of these, like Richard Hunt was one of the performers in it, but it was like this evil toy. I think it was the toy that saved Christmas or something like that.
The Christmas toy?
Maybe that's what it is, the Christmas toy?
I think so.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember the title of it.
I watched that as a kid, and I like every now and then a scene from that, especially the villain of that movie, will pop into my brain, and I'm like, what was that movie? And I kind of want to rewatch it.
Wait a minute. If it was the 90s, it couldn't have been Richard Hunt or Jim Henson because they both died in early 90s.
Richard Hunt was one of the performers in it, and Jim Henson was one of the performers in it, but I would have seen it like early 90s as a kid.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you possibly thinking, was Santa Claus in it?
I think Kermit as Santa.
Kermit as Santa.
Like, Kermit is in it.
Okay. Then it's not the Great Santa Claus switch.
No. You'll have to look it up. All right.
The Christmas Toy, 1986, which would have been correct for Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. Yep, that's what it was. It's 86, not 90. For some reason, I was thinking it was the 90s.
Yeah, I watched that as a kid, and I think the last time I saw it was when I was like 4.
Okay.
So it's like some memory shoved in the back of my brain, and I kind of want to rewatch it and see what it was like. Because if I recall correctly, it was kind of like Toy Story before Toy Story.
I think so. I've heard of this. I actually haven't seen it, but I know of it. Because it's like not Muppet, but it's Muppet adjacent.
Yes. it's in the Muppet neighborhood.
Yes.
Or the Muppet retirement community. All right. So this week our trivia is going to be, so BJ Novak, who plays Ryan in this show and is one of the writers, he was at a party and a famous politician came up to him, and BJ Novak asked him, "What's your favorite scene in The Office?" Because this politician said, "I love The Office." And they said it was the scene in the bedroom of this episode, when like they see the camera and Michael lays down. That is his favorite, or this politician's favorite. Okay, you found out it's a guy. That was this politician's favorite episode or favorite moment in the entire series. So what politician was he talking to at this party who loved the bedroom scene of this episode?
Yeah.
All right.
I have no idea. I don't remember.
It's an obscure. This is one of those that like you don't ask this trivia question thinking that people are going to answer it. You ask this trivia question for people to be like, "Oh, that's an interesting tidbit. I'll have to listen to next week's episode to find out who that politician was."
If they care.
If they care. You're like, politics are stupid.
Yeah.
Which you're not wrong. So until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.